Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining for this session. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here because I know you're really busy building the next great games that I'm so excited to play. I'm just hoping that today I can make that a little bit easier for you. When you're going through this creative process, there's artist pain that you're experiencing, and I have a couple tricks that I'm excited to share that will hopefully make it less stressful and more fun, because I think that's the main reason we're all here. We want to create art that's fun and that's playable and playful. So that's why I'm here today. Presentation's called Bridge the Taste Gap, Remember Your Way to Your Best Creative Work. I have a couple chapters to this presentation, so I'll take you through that and we'll get started. Oh yeah, actually, I should probably introduce myself. So my name is Angelie Patel. I have a background in psychology and human resource management because before I realized I wanted to be in gaming development, the responsible choice was to do training and development. I was excited to build things that were immersive and interactive and educational, and I was building virtual team building exercises and all of these very gamified things without realizing this was exactly the industry I wanted to be in. So I find it funny that 18-year-old me knew all the answers but didn't have the language for it, and now it's just so obvious. So I am still working on virtual team building. I'm also trying to build some educational games based around this content that we're going to be talking about today, but I'm very proud to be in the industry now. I do have graduate certificates in instructional design and applied positive psychology. So when we talk about metacognition and learning design, I promise you all of this is going to sound really geeky, but it's essential to doing your best work. And I'm excited to share more with you about that. And just some favorite games as an icebreaker. So I was really big in the Nancy Drew PC game series. It was a very fun mystery puzzle game series that has trickled out. I think they're working on rebranding, but I really loved all 30 something of those games. I'm a big fan of the Spyro trilogy. That was the most action-oriented game that I played, and I was very attached to that little purple dragon. And Disney Dreamlight Valley is my latest, just because I'm a Disney baby. I love seeing all the characters come together, but I love how they use the same user interactions across so many different contexts, because now I'm playing as a player, but also as a developer. And I think they're really good at using those resources and recycling without the player realizing they're recycling all of those great UX features. So little context about me, probably figured out how old I am based on those games, and that's totally fine. Let's get into it. Today's objectives. We're going to be distinguishing between high standards and perfectionism. So we're trying to replace self-sabotage with sustainable creative momentum, the things that are pushing you forward instead of feeling like you're trudging through the molasses. We're also going to design a personal creation strategy that emphasizes quantity as the fastest path to high quality work. So you've heard quality over quantity or quantity over quality. I want to remind you that quantity leads to quality. And when you build that into your process, things are going to be a lot easier. And then last but not least, I'm going to teach you a 4-step process to document your progress, strengthen memory, and train your brain to recognize positivity. I think artists are their own worst critics, and sometimes it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. So we're going to talk about some great ways for you to be able to do that. I call it metacognition in a minute. So we'll talk about that towards the end. I will be checking the chat. So if you have questions that pop up throughout, let me know. I believe we have about an hour together, so I'm probably going to wrap up a little early so we have time for questions. And there is a worksheet that I'll bring up later that I'm hoping Ratuja can share just to give you something tangible, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. So feel free to chime in at any time and we'll dig in. Okay, so for those of you who may or may not have heard the phrase before, the taste gap was coined by the NPR podcast host, Ira Glass. So it's been around for a minute. It's a concept that isn't super mainstream, but it's popular enough with the people who've heard of it, then they kind of get attached to it. And it's this concept of the gap between who you are and who it takes to deliver your vision. And I wanted to start with some context. There's this really beautiful video that was designed to tell the story. I think it's coming directly from Ira Glass. So rather than me reading the quote or paraphrasing poorly, you get to hear it from the best. So I'm going to play that video. It's only a couple minutes long, and it'll give you some really great context around why this is an important part of your creative process. I'm also going to skip ahead a little bit respectfully to the artist because there's a lot of static at the beginning. You should be able to hear. And let me know if you can't hear because this is still static. He'll start talking in a second.
Nobody tells people beginners.
Yeah?
You were essentially told this to me, is that all of us who do creative work, we get into it, and we get into it because we have good taste. But it's like there's a gap that for the first couple of years that you're making stuff, what you're making isn't so good, okay? It's not that great. it's trying to be good, it has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing is, at the end of the day, your taste is still killer. And your taste, your food love, you can tell that what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. You know what I mean? A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. And the thing I want to just like say to you, all my heart, is that most everybody I know who does interesting creative work, they went through a phase of years where they had really good taste, they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it was felt short. It didn't have the special thing that we wanted to have. And the thing I would say to you is everybody goes through that. And for you to go through it, you're going through it right now, if you're just getting into that phase, you gotta know it's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you can do is do a little work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself in deadline so that every week or every month you know you can finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're actually going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It takes a while. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while. And you just have to fight your way through that. Okay?
Easy enough, right? Just fight your way through all of those creative urges, all of those late nights spent creating something that you may never want to show the world because you think it's not good enough. It's easier said than done. So here's what we're going to do is talk about how we bridge that gap. Understanding perfectionism first. This is a difficult concept for some people because perfectionism is typically associated with greatness and excellence and unrelenting sense of determination to make something really, really great. And I want us to let go of perfectionism because it's actually hurting us more than it's helping us. Perfectionism is trying to reach a specific state that's so irrefutable. Like it's something that you just can't argue because something is so great that no one else can improve upon it. No one else can offer feedback. And that just doesn't exist. Even in nature, we'll see a lot of permutations of like flowers that look perfect because they follow that golden ratio. Or if you hit that target when you're doing some axe throwing, it's at the center of something. But it's a very static idea of what something perfect should look like. And it's in the imperfections that we have fun and we get to see the world for what it is. Creative work just can't be perfect. We're always improving. Every iteration, every update, every bug we fix, every time we see something new, we can add to the idea. The more people we add to a team, the more potential there is. So if you came in with an idea of what perfect would be, maybe it's dramatically different by the end of the process. Perfectionism isn't helping us. It's just holding us hostage for one particular idea of what will good look like. And then ultimately, as we start to get towards the skills and the behaviors that we know require us to be able to fulfill our vision, our idea of perfect might change as well. So as we grow, our vision will grow. So perfectionism never exists. It's a moving target. The only thing that I think helps me remember that perfectionism is really just people pleasing is figuring out whose rubric am I trying to follow. Is it what makes me feel good? Is it what makes me think other people will think it's good? But that people-pleasing tendency is typically when you know you're in perfectionism versus any other healthier state. And I'll say to you, no, creative work can't be perfect, but yes, dogs are always perfect. I just want to make that abundantly clear. Every dog I've ever met has always been perfect, and I will not elaborate further. Here's how I want to visualize the taste gap with you all. The taste gap is this chasm. It's wide, so you can't jump over it. There's a consequence that you might feel, like there's a depth to how you could fall and how upset you might be if you don't reach that goal. So we've got you kind of stressed in the corner here, this huge gap over here. And then this little diamond is the goal, this dream game that you're trying to develop, this character that you're trying to refine. Any particular part of your creative process is going to have this ultimate goal. And then you have this chasm to cross. With perfectionism, you're looking down. You're looking at all the things that could go wrong because you're trying so hard to fix all of them and have no room for feedback, no room for any edits because you've done it. You've completed something fantastic that no one else can pick at. So you're looking at the faults. You're not looking at the potential. Here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to replace perfectionism with high standards. You're looking up. You're looking higher. You're looking greater. You're looking at all of the ways that technology is evolving to help you realize your vision, all of the ways that your team is helping you realize your vision, and you're pushing each other and excited to collaborate. That's high standards because that's much more open-minded. It gives you more potential to try new things and to create something that you could have imagined before. Whereas perfectionism, looking down, there was only one solution and no other way out. So it opens you up to a concept called growth mindset, where instead of feeling this heaviness of a certain way to be, you're kind of competing against yourself. So you're just trying to do a little bit more and a little bit better than you did the day before, which compounds. It becomes much more successful over time than that perfectionistic tendency of not displaying anything or not having anything to show for your creative process because you were too embarrassed to show something that wasn't perfect yet. Growth mindset's the antithesis. It gives you the opportunity to keep iterating, keep growing, and see feedback as more of a positive thing because now it's helping you get to where you want to go. It's not a judgment. It's important data to stay on your path and get to where you want to be. So that's the taste gap with high standards. So now we're looking up. How do we fill this chasm? How do we cross this chasm? We're going to pay attention to our triggers first. So perfectionism is all of these things on the left, and high standards is all of the things on the right. So I don't know if anyone's ever played the put the finger up down games. Like you start with 10 fingers and everything you identify with, you put one finger down. I'm going to do this quickly, but I want you to kind of visualize or play the game as we go, because this is what's going to help us orient ourselves properly as we're starting to build that bridge. So perfectionism, and I'm guilty of all these too. Procrastinating on things that you don't want to get done, fearing failure and the embarrassment that might come from that, all or nothing thinking. So either it's everything that it was meant to be, or it's absolutely not worth anything at all. Unrealistic standards. I am a new developer. I might be in my 30s, but I'm also just a baby when it comes to game development. So I'm not going to compare myself to Activision. That's just not reasonable. And yet I feel like all of you might have those standards for yourselves, whereas these co-founders that are working together to build something great, you may not have the resources that a team of 25, 40 people could do. So be realistic with your standards so that you're not stuck, so that you can continue to iterate and get to those standards. The constant self-criticism, the ability to see everything that you do wrong, but not see what you do right. That's just punishing yourself. That's not really being constructive. So we're not trying to self-criticize too much. Difficulty delegating, especially as co-founders. If you're so attached to a particular way of doing something that you can't ask for help, you're holding yourself back. You're holding both of you back. Defensiveness, that's what happens when you can't accept feedback. So just be mindful of when you feel like you have to defend yourself rather than hear what people have to share with you. Because typically people who have things to share are trying to help you, ideally, in a perfect world. High sensitivity to failure. So if you're so concerned that something will go wrong that you're not even willing to try, that's concerning. So that's perfectionism again. And the focus on outcomes, people don't always understand this right away, but if you're focused on that final product to the point that you don't care how the journey goes, that's probably perfectionism, because the journey might be more self-punitive. Like you're pushing through, you're doing too many late nights, you're doing all these things at the cost of whatever your future self will feel. So you want to be focused on the journey as well. You want to know that you're taking care of yourself, that you're being kind to people, that the process you're doing is healthy and sustainable, so that you're not sacrificing it all for one particular outcome, when the journey could unfold and show you more ideas and more potential, and hopefully leave you feeling happier and more satisfied with your work. So outcomes aren't just the goal that you want. There's more to it. And then never feeling good enough or feeling like you have to be over prepared for everything. So that's a reflection of you feeling like you can't fulfill that potential. And it's not necessarily true. Sometimes people are just so hard on themselves that they feel like they have to overperform. But what are we overperforming against? It's that standard, that perfectionism set, the particular way that you think things are supposed to work that you're trying to supersede. So pay attention to those red flags, because I ran out of fingers. All my fingers are down. I've lived this, and that's why I do these presentations now, because I don't want anyone else to feel the same. Now we're going to pay attention to the green flags, the high standards. So small, consistent action. So that means programming a little bit every day instead of saving it all for the weekend and then having all of that anxiety build up throughout the week. Not really fearing the bad outcome or fearing things that we regret would happen. So when you think of yourself, unfortunately, at one point we're all going to die, and when we reflect on our lives, are you going to regret not building something? Or are you going to be proud for trying and getting closer and closer and closer? So you want to be more afraid of what you don't do than what you do. And you're paying attention to your strengths as much as your weaknesses. You're letting your strengths outpace them. You're being kind and compassionate when setting goals. This is something that's reasonable for me as a human. Positive self-regard. This is an aside, but I'm a tour guide, a docent at the Salvador Dali Museum in St. Petersburg. And if you're familiar with Salvador Dali's artwork, it was very grotesque, but it was very uniquely him. No one else could create that artwork. And he had unrelenting positive self-regard. Like he thought he was greater than great. And he was very talented, to be fair. But that positive self-regard is what took him through decades and decades of creativity across all forms. oil painting, sculptures, jewelry, furniture, fashion design. He wrote his own autobiography. That positive self-regard against all odds is a huge fuel and factor in success over time. So you need to be kind to yourself. You need to pay attention to the things you're doing well. We've talked about the willingness to collaborate, to hear other people's perspectives, and be willing to ask for feedback so that you're continuing to stay on the right path. And failure being part of the process. Not every experiment goes well. We're going to talk about how to factor those failures into your process so it's not so shocking. And then to the inverse of focusing on outcomes, now we're focused on effort. We're focused on how we're showing up, how the process is going, how our journey is going. Not what we can't control, which is the outcome, but what we can, which is how we show up. And we're embracing challenges as an opportunity for us to learn new things rather than them feeling like a test for us to judge ourselves against. A challenge is an opportunity to unlock new strengths and unlock new knowledge. And I keep thinking of when you like store things in a backpack for later, like those challenges that you've earned and the treasure you've gathered, like that's what challenges do. They give you the fuel and the things that you can keep for later. And hopefully you never have to sacrifice any of your loot. But ideally, all of that stays with you over time. That's more of the metacognition we'll talk about later. And I've already talked about work-life balance. So hopefully this is resonating for you. You can see the difference between the two columns because they're subtle if you're not paying attention. But the high standards is much more forward-driven, upwards-driven. Perfectionism is going to be holding you back. Yeah, and I see a comment that it's hard to balance positive self-regard with a big ego. The difference is whether you take feedback. So Dali would listen to feedback, he would hear stories, but he had this great quote, "Everything alters me, but nothing changes me." So his sense of ego was always static, like he always knew who he was, but it wasn't so inflated that he couldn't see how the world was changing around him and adapting accordingly. So if you're trying to muscle through an industry that's constantly changing without you finding ways to adapt yourself, then that's probably ego. But if you're keeping your voice, keeping your passion, your mission, the reasons that you want to create games clear, but then adapting how you go about it, then that's not ego, that's just a sense of self. So I hope that helps a little bit because I still struggle with this. I feel like when people seem impervious to feedback, that big ego can be very intimidating. But we need to have some sense of self. It's hard to be a creative without it. So yeah, the quote, "Everything alters me, but nothing changes me." That's Salvador Dali. And he might have said it like a little bit different syntax, but I keep that in mind pretty regularly. So yeah, awesome. Glad that could help. This is how we're going to form our creation strategy. I call it the first pancake theory. I think you've probably heard it from other people too. I'll go through how I see the metaphor, and then if you have any other feedback, please let me know because I think everyone tells the story a little bit differently. But if anyone's ever made pancakes before, or any version of them, crepes, dosas, anything that's like you cook it on a pan and you have to make batter for it. That's basically all we're talking about. The first one is always bad. No matter how many times you've made this recipe, no matter how many times you've perfected it and done everything you're supposed to do, the first one is always bad. The temperature has to be adjusted or the shape didn't come out right. It's just a part of the process. And when we're making pancakes, no one really questions it. Maybe it's kind of annoying to waste the batter, but it becomes part of the process that the first one is not so great. And then you move on and you do the second one. And before you know it, you found your rhythm. So building this understanding into your creative strategy can relieve so much of the anxiety to have to make that first draft perfect in order to get anything else done. So when you think of a first draft, it doesn't necessarily have to be the full video game. It could be a particular character sketch. It could be a particular level story arc. Anything where you're creating something net new, lower the bar for the first one. Just make it exist. And you might have heard that before too, but I mean like exist badly. Like make it intentionally bad to get it out of the way. And it might even feel a little silly, a little bit like a waste of time when you're so skilled, because I know you're all exceptionally skilled people. But our brains don't always know how to catch up with us. They don't always know that we do have the skills because maybe it's relatively new in the grand scheme of our lives. So giving it permission to do something bad and feel safe doing it is a gift. Yes, make it exist and you can make it better later. That's exactly what we're going for. So first draft is going to be bad. Second draft is going to be a little better. Third draft is going to be decent. And the fourth, fifth, final, whatever iteration it takes for you to get there is going to reduce that stress dramatically. Because now there's a less gap between where you started and where that final will be. Each pancake is taking you higher and higher. I made a little pad of butter at the top too. It's very small text, but it says positive feedback from others. So yes, we're accepting feedback. Yes, we're adjusting as we go. But the goal isn't that positive feedback that validates you. It's literally the butter on top. That's the part that makes everything worthwhile. And when you get to your customers, when you get to your gamer community, that they're going to be really enthusiastic because you've already put that work in. But if you're only fueled by what other people are going to say, then you don't get to hear your own creative energy as you're working your way up the stack. So listen for feedback, listen for where there's areas to clarify. But if you're only building for other people's validation, this process is going to be miserable, because now all you're thinking is what other people might think when they see your project instead of how you feel as it's progressing. So keep that in mind. The feedback from your team is useful. The feedback that you're giving yourself along the way, also useful. But waiting for all of those Steam reviews, waiting for all of the people that don't know how difficult it is to create a game to provide their 2 cents, that's not going to be helpful during the creative process. In the refinement, maybe, but like while you're building from scratch, give yourself some grace. So we'll kind of talk about what that can look like depending on, I say student, hobbyist, expert, and that's only because in any form that you're in, you might be really, really good at something because it's your specialty, but then brand new at something else. I have more of experience doing like voiceover work than I do like granular, like HTML coding, for example. So I consider myself a student with HTML, but I can knock out a pretty good e-learning module pretty quickly. And this is all kind of in the realm of creativity. I have these different tiers to help myself, but you can kind of place yourself wherever you see fit. So on the student side, make your assignment just absolutely horrendous first. Make that first draft just like work that you know would get enough. Then edit what makes you mad, because mad is a symbol, it's an emotion that signals your boundaries. So your boundaries are going to be violated when you purposely do something bad because your inner self knows you can do better. When you get mad about something that you just know you could do better at, focus there first. That's where the greatest potential will be. Then you can refine the details, and then you can play with it and make it refined enough that you can turn it into a professor or to a mentor for feedback. But the student mindset is make it bad, fix what you're mad about. Column 1. Column 2 is when you're more of a hobbyist. Like you kind of know what you're doing, you have some skills. It's like if you've been driving for a year or two, like you're confident, but you're not like an expert, so you're still paying attention when you're driving. This is when you get to have some fun with it. Make something ridiculous. Make something that you know is just outlandish, bizarre. When I first started using Twine, I was using it to just kind of practice the process of coding and creating my multifaceted choose your own adventure games. I made a game where your objective is to spell the word dog. So you're given all these letter options and you're just supposed to find the letter D. Then anytime it's not the letter D, it takes you back a step and makes a joke at your expense. It was so absurd. But through the process of that absurdity, I was like, oh, wait, no, now I can start to spell words as my shorthand for what these choose your own adventure branches should be. So now I've got like the crane branch and the horse branch and all these different things that help me organize my work in a really useful way. So I wasn't getting tangled in the web. So the absurdity typically unlocks something creative in you that can then help you continue to refine your expert perspective. So that hobbyist space, you know enough to be dangerous, but you're giving yourself grace to find your voice even more. So ridiculous, and then making it functional. So making sure that it actually does play or that it does resonate and get somewhere. Ridiculous to reasonable. So this might be when you want to start showing your friends something like, hey, this is kind of out of my wheelhouse, but I'm giving it a try. So you've kind of progressed it towards how other people can appreciate it and start to provide feedback. And then from reasonable to amusing, like now you get to start to elevate it and play with kind of the aesthetics or whatever outer layer. But at the core, you built something completely absurd to something playable and amusing, and you're giving yourself that space between when you start that project and when you finish it to go through all of those iterations instead of doing the whole time spent just making the first one. So using that time wisely, that quantity of stages is what's going to help benefit you with your insights. Expert level. This is where, like Alex had mentioned, the ego versus the positive self-regard. When you are an expert, you do have tremendous skills. No one's doubting it. No one will question that you're talented. But when you are an expert, you start to become a little bit more tunnel vision because you feel like you've been here before. Like you know how this works. You've done this challenge so many different times. And that can be useful because it gives you some confidence. But it can also be to your detriment because now you're not seeing all your creative ideas anymore. You're kind of stuck in autopilot. And that's when people might have a harder time working with you because they don't think you can take feedback because the ego is formed instead of the continuously rising high standards that continue to evolve when you're checking yourself as you go through the process. So I think of the Disney Pixar model, if I'm sure many of you are familiar, where when they're modeling new technology for their animation, they start with a short film. And then when that short film goes really well, then they'll expand it onto a larger feature film. So if you've watched those shorts that they play before a movie, it's typically a preview of what they're testing for something coming out in the next couple of years. That's what I want you to think about as an expert, because you typically know everything that's happening under the hood. Now you get to start to play with all the different stories that can be told, all the conventions you can break, and you've kind of done the tried and true things already. So now you get to be a little bit more unconventional and make it work. So when I think of Pixar, make the smallest possible story arc, and it could be as simple as something really beautiful, but the whole objective is to plant one singular flower. For example, if this is a gardening game. Super, super simple, but beautifully executed. Then make a 5-minute minigame, something that's a little bit more advanced, that has a little bit more depth to it. Maybe the 30 to 60 game, then finally refine into the larger game. But instead of messy to refined, now it's like this adorable little perfect, I don't want to use the word perfect, but it's just so freaking cute and mini. And now you get to expand on it in a more sustainable way. So this might help you when you're trying to get proof of concept to potential players or to potential investors. They're not seeing the later versions as the better versions. They're seeing a really good concept here, a very simple demo, and then you get to build from there, rather than feeling like you have to build the whole game and then refine to a demo, which I've seen people do. A lot of indie developers that have the super clear vision. One of my friends worked on the game for 10 years by herself, and she just made the whole game, refined it to a demo, and then launched it. And was she successful? Yes. But at some point, if you've been doing something for 10 years, of course you're going to be successful. I just feel like she could have had a lot less suffering in that process if she had made some milestones and checkpoints for herself. And I see someone, oh, Alex, yes. The student level is an exercise that's used in therapy to help people with their perfectionism. So yeah, exactly. We're on the same page. I'm not a therapist, but I do work in the cognitive science space. So I think there's some overlap there because it's still a human brain. Whether you're recovering something or whether you're building towards something, your brain needs that structure to move forward. So that's our creation strategy. And I have mixed feelings about this graphic, but I hope people take it in like good intention, because I don't think anyone really wants to ever be stepping on food. But the point is, the pancake stacks that you're making along the way, that's what's filling your taste gap. That's what's giving you the stepping stones, the milestones, the confidence, all of those building blocks to bridge that taste gap. And it's up to you to fill it with that quantity, because the quantity is what gives you that momentum and that compounding benefit. If you only did one project, that's not bridging anything. That's like a drop in the bucket. But the quantity and the variety of things that you're learning, that's what's going to give you the confidence to keep shooting for the stars. But I do love this little character guy that's like, woo, here we go, because it is less stressful. Now you're just having fun, building fun things. There isn't this internal pressure to hold yourself to a standard that doesn't exist. You're shooting for the stars now. So that's the goal here, is to have fun with it, to be iterative, and not think that every iteration has to be Oscar worthy, because it's just not practical. And holding ourselves to impractical standards is kind of what leads to burnout. That's our creation strategy with all of our first pancakes and all of our pancake stacks. That's what we ultimately have to do. Now, how we do that is what I call metacognition in a minute. If you're familiar with the fantastic athletes that were just in the Winter Olympics, Eileen Gu was phenomenal, and she gave this really great interview that I want to play for you all because I think her answer is really fantastic. It's about neuroplasticity and how she goes about navigating the world and becoming her greatest self. So let me know if you can't hear it, but I think you should be able to because the first one worked.
This isn't supposed to be a rude question. But do you think before you speak? Because you answer questions so quickly and so comprehensively, whether it's about geopolitics or your sport or aerodynamics. Like, can you take us into your brain?
Thank
you, Charlotte. That's very kind. Oh man. Do I think? I think overall I'm just a pensive person. Like I'm a very introspective, I'm an introspective young woman. Like I spend a lot of time in my head, and it's not a bad place to be. I journal a lot. I break down all of my thought processes. I think I apply a very analytical lens to my own thinking, and I kind of modify it because it's so interesting. You can control what you think. Like you can control how you think, and therefore you can control who you are. And especially as a young person, like I'm 22, so with neuroplasticity on my side, I can literally become exactly who I want to be. How cool is that? Like how empowering is that, right? And so the fact is, I get to become every day the kind of person that me at age 8 would revere. Like would be obsessed with me today. Are you kidding? I would love me. And I think that's the biggest flex of all time, that you can have like little younger you be proud of you today. And so I guess for me, it's like, yes, I spend a lot of time in my own head. Yes, I think a lot, but it's not really like in an egotistical kind of way. It's in like a tinkering, like a scientist kind of way. I'm always like trying to modify. I'm trying to think, how can I be better? How can I approach my own brain the way that I approach my craft of free skiing, so that I can be better tomorrow than I was today.
Awesome. Yeah. And I see Alex put in the chat, metacognition is thinking about your own thinking. Exactly. That's what we're going to dig into next. So cognition is how your brain is processing all of that information. And what Eileen is talking about is the ability to control that by taking it an extra level up. So this is what your brain's doing automatically, but by pausing and reflecting, and she says she journals, all of those extra layers on top, you now get to see the world from that 30,000 foot view and make concerted changes. Maybe there are things that could be refined in your life that make it easier to do your best creative work. Maybe, I don't know how early all of you realized that you wanted to be in this industry. Some people it's 8 years old, some people it's later, but you had a vision of how that was supposed to happen. And as you're going through that journey, you're becoming someone new with every memory that you're forming, with every choice that you're making. So maybe you're doing it on autopilot, but I don't think you can when you have to be creative. We just have to be intentional about what we're telling ourselves and the stories that we're building around our own lore. So we'll go into how you can do that, because now we know what we're doing is this iterative process of creation, building in room for failure, because it's not a personal reflection, it's just part of the process. How we go about it to manage our emotions, to do things with clarity and with confidence, is that metacognition piece. So I call this the CAMP model. This is something that I developed using behavioral neuroscience and applied positive psychology and instructional design. And it's intentionally designed to be super, super simple, to the point that most people think this is obvious. But if you're missing any one of these steps, which a lot of people typically are, you're stuck in a cycle that isn't actually helping you reach that next greatest version of yourself. And that's what we're aiming for when we're doing all these creative iterations. We want to become the person that can fulfill the vision from the other side of that taste gap. And that means being a different person than when you started. That can be very intimidating, that can cause a lot of anxiety, but by intervening with 4 questions that relate to these 4 steps, you're giving yourself the opportunity to become that new person. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. You don't spend hours doing it. That's why I call it metacognition in a minute. It's not requiring you to go to 1,500 hours of therapy, which is still valuable, and I really love therapy and I partake myself. But if you're only waiting for those therapeutic hours and you're not paying attention to everything that's happening in between, you're losing a lot of valuable opportunities to learn about yourself. So we'll go through step by step. There's a reason that your worksheet looks like this. So we have curiosity and activity at the top, and we have memory and positivity at the bottom. The curiosity and activity side of things are, I guess I should do this the opposite way, expansive. This is how you're getting yourself out of your comfort zone. You're exploring and gathering new information. You're trying new things. You're taking yourself out of your brain. The memory and positivity piece is reflective, and that's what's holding it in, keeping it in your brain. So you've taken some new information and now you're filing it away for later in a way that's meaningful to you. Then the curiosity and memory side, that's happening in your brain. So curiosity questions that we ask ourselves, the memories we choose to keep, that's our inner world. Whereas the other side, activity and positivity, those are external. Those are things that other people can see. So this balance of these 4, the balance is important, because if you're stuck in your head, then you're probably not doing enough to show yourself your own progress. And if you're constantly going, if you're being so expansive, but you're not taking the time to reflect, you're probably taking yourself for granted. So we need to find some balance in these quadrants. We need to make sure that when we're asking new things of ourselves, that we're embedding that story in a meaningful way, in a way that's complete, so that we're not lopsided, and that's going to lead to more burnout and anxiety and stress. We'll break this down step by step. So feel free to download the guide. And then as we're going through that, I want you to think of the latest creative project that you worked on. And it doesn't have to be a full project. It doesn't have to be like an entire video game entirety. It could be a little story arc. It could be a character development. It could be one particular UX feature that you're working on. You can keep it simple and concrete, but whatever was latest, we'll reflect on together during this process. So the first step is curiosity. Curiosity is so used in so many different contexts, so I feel like everyone has their own definition. In this space, it's asking your brain a question it wants to answer. What's happening in your brain when new information is presented to you is very multifaceted. One part of your brain is asking, how much of a gap is there between what I know and what I need to know for this information to be valuable? So it's doing kind of an analysis of that. The other part of your brain is judging, is this even worthwhile? Like, do I need to know this? So it's sort of like when you're going shopping and you see how expensive a sweater is and you're deciding like, how much money's in my wallet? How much am I going to spend in order to buy this sweater? I mean, do I even want the sweater? Like, is it even a nice sweater? I don't even know. That's how every single one of your memories gets processed. And if there's too much of a gap, if you don't have enough money in the bank for the sweater, or if you think the sweater is ugly, then that memory gets filed away as something that can cause anxiety or fear or stress or sadness. Your amygdala fires and says, absolutely no way, we're not keeping this one. This memory is not worth keeping. When you tap into curiosity, when you go into the store with a particular mission of, I'm looking for a particular sweater in this price range, and I want it to look like XYZ. Now you're on a mission. Your brain wants to seek out that information. It wants to look for an answer. That's why curiosity framed as a question is so powerful. It doesn't want the open loop. It wants a resolution to that mission, which I'm sure we're all very familiar with. A mission without a resolution is very unsatisfying. So you're setting yourself out for a mission. And this is that expansive piece because now you're leaving your lived experience and you're going out on a quest. You're doing something new and you don't really know how the outcome's going to work, but you're setting the intention of this is what I want to learn. My recommendation when you're setting curiosity questions is something small, specific, and relevant to your larger story. So what's one thing I can create today is going to be a lot less overwhelming than how is this entire project going to work? And when you're scoping, you can scope and say, this is what I'm working on today. This is what the next 6 months will look like. But being concrete about what each individual plot point is what makes it manageable for your brain to keep track of everything along the way. If the question is too expansive, if it's too over the top, then your brain just shuts down and disengages and it doesn't want to pay attention anymore because it's feeling how much cognitive energy it will take to be able to figure out that answer. So if you've ever waited for a really large file to download, that's what it feels like when your brain's trying to answer all of those mini curiosity questions all at once. You're trying to download one file at a time, one memory at a time, and then let them compound. So that's curiosity. Then we can go into activity. This is a great time too, if you have the journaling guide, think about what you were curious about when you made your last creative project. What were you hoping to solve for? What were you excited to test out? Maybe you're using a new feature or creating a character for the first time. I'm using broad generalizations here because I don't know specifically what projects you're working on, but I hope it's easy for you to customize based on what your priorities are right now. So activity is when you're actually doing something to answer the question. This is not when you get stuck in your ideas of what could be done, how it could work. Anything that's happening inside your head is not expansive. It's just recycling what you already know. I don't mean to be polarizing. I am very anti-generative AI because all it's doing is recycling other artists' work and it's not giving us new information. It's just consolidating what it already knows. Yeah, it's remixed it, so it looks a little bit different, but that's kind of what's happening in your brain if you're not actually going out and creating something new. So for me, as an instructional designer, we're teaching people new concepts. So we're giving them the resources to do their best work. That's typically consuming knowledge. So remembering information, understanding it, applying it, analyzing, evaluating, all of that's happening in your brain, and that's useful. So that's like attending a class on game development or game writing. It's playing other people's games and learning more from that and enjoying that. That's consuming and that's wonderful. And that's a big part of what makes us who we are. It's what unlocks something within us. But the really rich and juicy memories that make us the experts that we want to be, that are refining our creative craft and making our best work, they're creating. They're doing new things. They're making something out of nothing, using that knowledge they learned, but actually doing something and making something exist outside of their sense of self. Tiny step out of your previous experience is fine too. An example that I'll use is something as simple as that expert level where you've taken that mini game and you expand an extra level. That can be the way that you operate too. Like level 1 is I'm going to make that really essential outline. Level 2 is I'm going to start to refine that outline, add some more bullet points. That's activity. It does not have to be a home run in a baseball game every time for it to count as something meaningful. Meaningful is just any step doing something you've never done before. Your brain will get excited about it when it answers that curiosity question. So if my curiosity question is, what's the simplest game I could make in Twine today? And then the activity is actually making a game in Twine, your brain is excited about that. It gets like a reward boost when it decides that you did something that closed a loop and it added to this sense of wonder and curiosity in your life. Solving that curiosity question may not be possible in that day, but doing something to contribute to that curiosity question, valuable, incredibly valuable. I also recommend that you do not judge how good that activity is. When you look back on the memory from 10 years ago and how hard you were trying when you were a beginner at something, I think typically we all look at it with kinder eyes because we only know as much as we know. And as we get older, we can do better now, but we couldn't at the time. And then us in 10 years is like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I was stressed because this was the best work I could do and there was no other way but through. So try not to judge yourself for the activity. Maybe the best thing you can do then is track the 5 senses. What did you see, hear, taste if you're doing something in cooking? Anything that lets your brain latch on to more of the sensory experience to make the memory richer. Don't judge it as positive or negative. We can talk about that in the memory phase. Just take it all in. Live in the moment. We can analyze it all later. So that's activity. If you want to take a few moments to jot down things that you've done to answer those curiosity questions, maybe new experiments you've run or things you refined, what helped you in that very moment. Next step, memory. And I promise this goes by faster when you know what you're looking for. This is teaching the thing. When you start to do the thing, it happens a lot faster. Memory is describing what was just too important to forget. So whatever you were doing, what was your biggest insight or epiphany? What were the strong emotions you felt? So maybe you felt really embarrassed about something that you did that was just really bad and you couldn't believe that you did something that bad. Or maybe something made you really frustrated because you feel like you could do better and now you're motivated to solve it. Maybe you're feeling sadness because you wished that something could have been different that it isn't. There's so many emotions that can come up, and that's happening now internally, and it's the meaning making. So now you're telling the story about this moment. If you think about Inside Out, the movie, Pixar movie Inside Out, about the young girl who has all these emotions in her brain, and they make the little orbs. The little orbs, that's what we're doing right now. And we're color coding them with whatever emotion we're feeling. And that little memory is going to go into long-term storage at some point, and it's going to go into a larger story of who you are. But that can't happen unless you pay attention to the singular moment right now. So what was your biggest insight? What was your biggest takeaway? What was really special about what you did today? And it doesn't have to be, again, grandiose. It can just be as simple as like, I tried again. Like I did a thing that I didn't like doing, but I tried again and I was embarrassed about it. But later, maybe I'll look at it and be proud because I've had some time to process and had some time to think about how hard it is to do new things for the first time, and then gave myself the grace to keep trying so that I could be great at it in the future. So the emotion might change, but you have to remember the moment in order for the emotionality to happen. Thinking about outcomes, thinking about measurements of success, all of those things happen in the memory piece. And feel free to jot those down in your journaling guide. So what were the insights that you had during that activity that you did, answering the curiosity question that you posed. But we're at level 3 of 4, and this can happen in rapid fire. So again, my twine game, I was curious about the twine game I could build. The activity was building the game. The memory was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I feel like a 5-year-old. Like anybody that's in gaming would think this was such a waste of time because they have so much more time and expertise than me. So I'm feeling really embarrassed. Then I think about my experience in other places. Like I wasn't sitting around waiting to be in my 30s. I was doing cool things, and those are transferable skills. And that shift from embarrassment to proud only happened when I reflected on this moment in the grand scheme of things. And that's what Eileen Gu is talking about. So if you're going through life and you're constantly feeling that self-criticism, if the memories are all encoded as I'm not good enough, or I didn't try hard enough, or there's still so much room for improvement and I'm so mad at myself, then that's the story your brain's always going to tell. But when you find those little micro moments of positivity that we'll talk about next, the brain tells a different story, then you start to look for those moments a lot more, and it completely transforms your sense of self. That's that neuroplasticity. You have the option to choose something different. And that's what's going to create the person that can, again, fulfill your vision. So any big insights that you had from that last creative project, that'll go in the memory box, which is cute. I don't know if you have an actual like memento memory box, but that's also a great way to do that, to gather all of those certificates and nice notes from colleagues and all of those things. It's nice to have a physical representation of that if you get the chance. Last but not least, this was a great question that Alex posed. Why is positivity external? It feels like it should be internal because it's related to an emotional state. We're going to look at this in terms of almost like math. So positivity is when we're going to reflect on how you've grown from this experience. So yes, it could be emotionally positive, like happy, prideful, joyful, all those great things is part of it. That's more of the memory piece. I'm talking about like positive numbers. Like I added a ring to my sense of, if you've seen trees where they grow outward, adding a new ring is positivity. Negativity is taking a step back. You're taking things away from yourself. But when it comes to memories, maybe some things are forgotten, but they're not really forgotten. They're just hidden. Realistically, you're always growing outwards. With every experience you have, with every memory you make, it's expansive. you become an entirely new person basically every 7 years. So when you're thinking about these little moments that build over time, the positivity comes from your growth, not necessarily how you felt. And as a learning designer, most people don't enjoy learning. They find it really frustrating. When you're doing something new, it's typically not a comfortable process, but that doesn't mean it wasn't positive. So exactly, we're adding something, achieving something. It's not just the positive emotion. Because people have heard like toxic positivities when you turn everything negative into positive because you don't know how to sit with your negative emotions. We're talking about just net progress. And the story you could be telling yourself is, I am more determined because I did something that required determination. I am braver because I tried something new. I'm a better colleague than I was the day before because I helped someone who needed it. Anything that has that sense of more, that muchness that comes from doing something greater. So the question that you're asking here is, how did this experience make me more of the person I want to be? Because realistically, there's no, again, if we remove the perfectionism, there's no score that you have to meet in what good enough looks like when it comes to these human skills, these attributes that make you a creative person. We talk about XP in video games, like the experience points are what we're measuring right now. It wasn't how many you earned, it's just earning them and giving yourself the chance to bank them over time. And I do really love that metaphor too, because we're not always building experience points in every single facet of our life every day. So sometimes some are prioritized more than others based on the day-to-day life that we lead, but they're still happening. They're still accumulating over time if we give ourselves a chance to save them. And I go to nature for this too, because the example I have is the acorn in the tree. Acorns have everything they need to become an oak tree. They just need water and sunshine and time. Like, that's all they need. They have all the genetic material. They have all of the recipes and instructions within them. And I wish humans worked the same. Sometimes it feels like we don't. But when you give them the space to grow and to thrive, then those rings start to form that show how long they've been alive, how much they've accumulated, the branches that have grown, the leaves that have grown. That's positivity. That's just being more than when you started. And all of you, I would consider immensely positive. You've started your own studios. Like, that's incredibly cool. That's incredibly brave and ambitious and all of these things that I'm sure you were when you were a young child. And now you just have a really great outlet for it. And the fact that you get to build on that skill over time so that 8-year-old you would be super impressed and just be in awe of who you are, we get to keep that going for the next several decades. This is just going to continue to compound if you're paying attention to it. So people typically miss this step when they're like, well, I didn't reach the outcome I wanted, so it wasn't really that great. But the outcomes are not what we're measuring. We talked about that with the perfectionism piece. You can't control the outcome, but you can control the effort. How you showed up, what you tried. That's where the positivity comes in. That's where you're aligning your sense of self to how you show up, not what you can't control, which is the outcome. So for me, I will pitch different ideas to people and they won't always resonate, but I'm the person that tries. I'm the person that puts in the reps, that makes new projects, that chooses to lean into the creativity. And someday I will hit that home run and there's something will work out. But if I don't keep showing up, that won't happen. And I just hope we'll all give ourselves the grace to do the same, to see that progress over time. That would be the CAMP model in its entirety. And I'll show you the graphic again. And I want to see if we have some examples of like what we can do in 60 seconds. So I've got the questions up here. Does anyone want to share like 4 sentences or even just 4 bullet points in the chat of like how you would go about this? And you don't have to if you don't want to, because I'll just do my closing comments. But I have an example. Actually, I was talking to Ratuja. I gave the speech not too long ago. A bunch of really lovely students in Scotland were doing a showcase for their game development and showing their final projects. And they were really enthusiastic. I really adored working with them. So if I go through my experience of speaking with them, really, really simple. I was curious about how I could add value to these students that were going through these immense creative changes. They were building things for the first time. How can I help them? The activity I did was giving that speech and answering questions and being in the moment and being present with them and figuring out the best way for me to add value as someone who didn't help with their projects but wants to help see them grow. The memory that I'm taking away from that was how fueled I felt, how inspired I felt by their just pure enthusiasm for being in this industry, and how stressed they still were. I was stressed for them. I know the industry keeps changing and it's not easy to be here, but their enthusiasm is what's going to lead them to bridge the taste gap, and they now have new tools to make that happen. So the outcomes I saw there were positively impacted people, which means that I got to be more of myself by being someone that gets to use her knowledge to help other people. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a really lengthy reflection to be meaningful. But if you're going through this every day, if you're taking a moment just to yourself in your brain, written on a journal paper somewhere, to answer these 4 questions every time you do something new for the first time, it can completely transform you in as easy as, like, I'm going to say 6 months. This is not about gaming. I went from someone who was not remotely athletic. I hated gym class. I did not feel coordinated. I thought I would never find a sport that I enjoyed. I started by putting moisturizer on my face and decided I'm the person that shows up for herself, that takes care of her body. So every night when I put moisturizer on my face, I would do the little camp model and say, like, I'm curious how much my skin will get better. I'm going to put the moisturizer on my face. I'm going to remember how good it feels to take care of myself. And the positivity is I'm someone who shows up for herself and takes care of her body. Then I did 1 rowing class on an erging machine. That 1 class became 2 a week. That 2 a week became doubles. And then within 6 months, I rode a half marathon. I cannot tell you any more clearly than that this is transformational, and it does not require money. It does not require anything other than just being present with yourself. And I can only see with all of the skills you already have that there will be tremendous opportunities for you to grow if you're just giving yourself that opportunity to see how far you've come. So very excited to share this with you all. I think we achieved our objectives. We talked about distinguishing between high standards and perfectionism and the symbols and signs you can look for when you're leaning more towards one or the other. We talked about our creation strategy and whether you're feeling like a novice or an expert, what that can look like for you as you adapt from your first pancake to a full stack. And then you learn to apply this 4-step reflection model, the camp model, so that you can continue to embed those memories on your own terms and tell a story about yourself that you're going to be proud to remember. So I really appreciate you all spending time with me. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, to send follow-up questions to me via email. Feel free to connect with me on Discord because you can send me messages and I'm happy to help there too. And then Instagram. So any of those options, I'm just happy to help and happy to share more with you. That was sort of the higher level neuroscience, but if you really want to get geeky with me, I'm happy to share more. That's everything on my end. Oh, thank you, Karen. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for sharing that. Most creative way I've ever seen thank you spelled, and yet I knew exactly what you said. Any questions? Anyone want to run by how you would use the model and see if I can offer any feedback? Because I want this to be easy and applicable for you. Okay, so Alex said it was easy to follow, great to watch listen. Thanks, Alex. And thank you for showing up when it's so late at night for you. No worries at all. I'm appreciative that you were here. Thank you for your great questions too. So we talked about ego and all of the things that can get in the way of feedback in this iterative process. I think I was a very egotistical college student because I felt like I knew everything. I was in my niche. And sometimes it can be hard to learn something like this because you think you have all the answers. So I try to lead with my personal experience, which is that, like, the half marathon thing, my family was stunned by, but everyone's got their own story. So if you're practicing a little bit and you can lead by example and show people how you used it, I think that resonates the best. But yeah, I'm trying to gather more stories. So if you're using this model and you want to share updates with me, please let me know. I would love to celebrate that with you. And again, it doesn't have to be an overnight success. It's something that just happens over time. But the more you pay attention, the easier it is to see. You're using this for everything. Oh, great. Odaya, I'm pronouncing that right, I hope. I'm glad you learned a lot. And yes, the pancakes, it's really easy to remember the pancakes. I do apologize if I made anyone hungry. Oday, okay, great. Good to meet you, Oday. And then Renard is saying, I love the approach of treating every mistake or generally every action you make as a chance to grow. It is very D&D-like, yes. When you want to treat yourself like a character that you're slowly building from the first level to 20. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. You're creating your character. You're living the experience. You don't necessarily know what's going to happen because you're D&D. Oh gosh, it's not Dungeon Master. What is the lead person that's creating the story? I'm forgetting the name right now. But the person creating your story is... yeah, your DM. Your DM is creating the story you have no control over. That's kind of like life as a whole. And ideally, your DM wants you to succeed. Like, I'd like to believe that the universe generally wants us to succeed, even when things are tough. Paying attention, learning as you go, keeping those stories, that's what's going to get you to that final success. So adapting the camp model to Spanish, I feel like it could be used as a really useful therapeutic tool. I don't speak Spanish fluently. I can look into that for you, but this is intellectual property for me, so I want to make sure I'm refining how the story is told. If there's a particular audience that you think would benefit from it, I'm happy to partner with you and make it happen. Just because I'm trying to keep the story coherent, there might be a book coming out next year, so just let me know. I have to figure out the timeline. That's why I'm like, I don't want to jinx it, but that's, again, part of the process. I'm starting with research summaries, then building out a white paper, then the book is going to be next. So I'm practicing what I preach here. Oh, awesome, Alex. I didn't realize you were a therapist. That makes sense that you knew all these therapy things. So then, yeah, please feel free to message me. We'll figure that out offline. Renard is saying, I recently learned the concept of narcissist shame, which might also be useful to look at for people with perfectionism and procrastination problems. Interesting. Again, I'm not a therapist, so I don't actually know how to speak to that particular experience. But yeah, I guess there's so many layers to this. There's the layer of just being a human, and then the lived experience that we bring along with us. So if you're struggling with perfectionism, I definitely recommend talking to someone that specializes in showing up for you as a human, being a therapist, counselor, religious leader, someone that you trust. I think all of those are really important people to go to. I'm just giving you an extra tool in your toolkit. I'm just grateful. Thank you for letting me talk about something I love. I'm glad I could give you some more information to help you with your creative journey. And I cannot wait to see what you build. Like, at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, is giving you what you need so that you can do your best creative work and that we get to benefit from it and get to play it too. So it's maybe a little bit self-serving, but regardless, I'm happy to support the journey and then see the great things that come out of it. Thank you.